So my boyfriend Sean and I, we both bought the one-way ticket to Thailand, and we did not have a job. We just showed up. We bought that flight to Bangkok, and we stayed in Bangkok for about 7 days, kind of just adjusting to jet lag and kind of recovering from all the amount of work it took to leave the US. And then we knew we wanted to be in Chiang Mai just from the one guy, Kel, the one that I met in the hostel and said he was moving to Thailand. He was moving to Chiang Mai, and he said he found a job there, so you should be able to too. So I just believed him.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode number 33 of the Emigrant Slide podcast, where we share stories of people who left their country to chase a better life. And through these stories, I hope you can find ideas, resources, and motivation to do the same. I'm Daniel DiBiasi, and my guest this week is Amanda. Amanda is originally from the United States and moved to Thailand after she graduated from university to teach English. She then started her own company called Settle In Abroad to help people move and find a job in Thailand. She's been living in Chiang Mai for the last 5 years, and she has no regret about leaving the US. In this episode, Amanda shares a lot of information and tips if you're planning to move to Thailand. She actually made me want to move there after the conversation with her. Which, if everything goes well, I might actually do it. I've been thinking a lot about moving to Thailand or Bali. It was actually Ray from episode 23 that planted the idea in my head. If teaching English in Thailand sounds appealing, or you have an online business, this episode is definitely for you. And if you haven't listened to Ray's episode yet, that's another good one you should listen to. Before moving to my conversation with Amanda, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. And it would be great if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. Oh, one more thing. If English is your second language and you have trouble understanding the conversation, you can find the full transcript of this episode in the show notes at emigrantlife.com/episode 33. And now, please enjoy my conversation with Amanda. Hi, Amanda. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
No worries. My pleasure. I'm actually pretty excited to have you on the show because I think the listener can learn quite a bit from your story because you're now using your knowledge and experience to help others doing the same thing. In fact, you founded the company Settle In Abroad, which helps other people moving to Thailand, which is where you live now, right?
Yes.
Let's start from the beginning. You're originally from New York City. When did you decide to leave the US and why did you decide to leave the US?
Yeah, so I left the US in 2016. I decided to move to Thailand to teach English.
So you left the US and you went straight to Thailand?
I had studied abroad my third year of university in Paris, and I studied there for 6 months, and that really ignited my love for travel and realizing that there's certainly more out there than just the US. So I finished my last year of university, and then I knew I was not ready to go straight to a corporate job. I needed to see more of the world. So I saw that teaching English was a possibility, and I just decided to choose Thailand.
Okay, why Thailand?
So it can be a long story. I'll make it short. But so while I studied abroad in Paris, I was traveling throughout Europe every single weekend. And one weekend I chose to go to Poland because I found a flight from Paris for 30 euros round trip. So that's determined where I went. So I went to Poland, and I actually ended up meeting someone in a hostel, and he said he was working on his TEFL, which is the Teach English as a Foreign Language certificate. And he was working on that and going to then move to Thailand. So halfway through my study abroad, I was like, oh, great. So there's opportunities for me to work abroad because it's been great studying abroad, but I'm definitely going to need some money after school. So I kept in touch with him for about a year and just decided to buy a one-way ticket to Bangkok.
Okay, so you're like a pretty decided that you didn't want to live in the US. You wanted to go to Thailand, or at least you wanted to do some experience abroad, right?
Yes, exactly.
And you've now been in Thailand for 5 years, roughly, right?
Yeah, it's almost about 5 years.
So why did you decide to stay in Thailand and not try something else?
I've been able to travel my 5 years living here. So Chiang Mai in Thailand has been my home base, but I've had the opportunity to visit many other countries in Southeast Asia and on other continents around the world. But Thailand just has my heart. It's my home. Thai people are so generous and wonderful. It's so safe here. You don't hear anything about people's house getting broken into or getting something stolen. It's really like they lost something and then they'll get it back. So in Thailand, yeah, people don't steal things, they return things, which is just unbelievable and amazing. And also the community of foreigners that live here from all over the world has really helped me ground here and stay, to meet other people doing their own businesses and, really following their dreams and loving life here. It's really positive living in Thailand.
So you say it's a safe country, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, usually the stereotype is it's not like a super safe country, or it's just in certain cities.
Well, it depends who you speak to. And maybe a mom might think that Southeast Asia is scary for their child to go live in forever. But really, I've never felt safer in Thailand. And living in New York City, I have always felt safe in New York City. But now when I go back and visit, I don't feel as safe because I realize I'm my bubble of Thailand and people are really wonderful here. Yeah.
Did you learn the language, or you just didn't have to learn the language to live in Thailand?
I'm still learning. Thai is a very difficult language. Yeah, Thai is a very tough language. So I've been learning. People have the opportunity to get a Thai education visa to learn Thai for a year. I've never done that because I've had my business set up in Thailand. But I'm really looking forward to learning more. I've had a private teacher come to my house once a week, but really it's practicing the conversation. And even though I'm here, Thai is a very difficult language because it has 5 different tones, as a lot of Asian languages do. So one word can mean 5 different things depending on the sound you put at the end of it. So it's quite challenging, but I'm going to keep learning because I know it will only help me, and I want to connect more with the locals and keep connecting with them. But yeah, you don't need to know Thai to move to Thailand.
Does that mean that Thai people speak fluently English, or?
Thai people definitely speak English. Of course, it depends where you're located. Like in the major cities, like in Bangkok and Chiang Mai, of course, there's more tourism, so people speak more English. In the more rural areas of the country, it certainly is harder. And when people live in more rural areas, the foreigners usually will become fluent in Thai because they're kind of forced into it. So there's many different experiences that you could have living in Thailand, as there is when you move to any country. You can choose to live, be in a homestay, so then you learn the language and get to know a family, or you can be in a bigger metropolitan city and meet other foreigners as well. But yeah, speaking English, you're still able to connect to the locals. But of course, it's helpful. My Thai is fluent enough to get around, to order food, to go shopping. And the one thing that's great about Thailand is they really appreciate when you do speak Thai. They're way too nice. You say one sentence and, you get a whole applause. They're so happy and wow, so it's such good Thai. And it's please don't give me that much credit. But it is positive. It's good to, once you learn something, that you can go try it and people are willing to help you out and understand what you're saying.
So when you decide to move to Thailand, you pretty much already had a job, I guess, when you decide to move?
No, actually. So my boyfriend, Sean, and we both bought the one-way ticket to Thailand, and we did not have a job. We just showed up. We bought that flight to Bangkok, and we stayed in Bangkok for about 7 days, kind of just adjusting to jet lag and kind of recovering from all the amount of work it took to leave the US. And then we knew we wanted to be in Chiang Mai just from the one guy, Kel, the one that I met in the hostel and said he was moving to Thailand. He was moving to Chiang Mai, and he said he found a job there, so you should be able to too. So I just believed him. And we just started interviewing. It took me about 2 months to get my first teaching job because we came in the middle of the school year, kind of the beginning of the middle. In Thailand, the school year starts in May, and we got there in July. So usually, teachers just started and aren't leaving their job yet. My boyfriend was able to find a job because they had one science teacher position available, and his background is in science. And I had to wait a little longer to find one. But it was fun. The 2 months without the job first, I was really just able to sit at cafes, explore, and see the Thailand that I decided to move to and had been thinking about for at least a year. So yeah, I found a job eventually. And really why I started helping people find jobs in Thailand, which is one of the services my company provides, is because it's helpful to know what you should be getting paid as a teacher and what type of packages you should have. At a teaching job, you should certainly be getting a visa and a work permit. and be paid like a minimum of $1,000 a month. There's certain things in paid vacation you should be getting. So when I found my first job on my own, it wasn't perfect and I didn't get paid as well as I should have been. So I eventually found a job that I really loved about like 6 months into Thailand, but I decided to make my company so people can arrive in Thailand and have the perfect setup already.
Okay, so you started the company fairly quickly when you moved to Thailand.
I basically had the idea 3 months into being in Thailand because I was the happiest I'd ever been. And I knew people thought we were crazy for doing it, but everything worked out so well. So I wanted to really try to help others be able to do what we did and really like live their life, follow their dreams, and be happy. Because teaching English really opens up so many doors. Like if you teach English in Thailand, you might do it for a year, you might do it for 2. Some people are still doing it 10 years later. That's great. But what I really try to help people understand is it just really puts you out of your comfort zone and you get paid for it and you're helping out the country and helping out people. So it's a really great opportunity to just start something, start a new life somewhere, and just wait to see what opportunities open for you.
Let's talk a little bit more about teaching English in Thailand. Do you need any qualification to teach English in Thailand?
So you need a bachelor's degree at minimum. It can be in any subject, doesn't have to be in English or in education, and that can be from any country. It depends on the school. Thailand does like to have native English speakers for most of their teaching positions. However, many schools do also offer positions for non-native teachers, and I can help as well. Non-native English teachers find a job in Thailand. But yes, you at minimum need a bachelor's degree.
Okay, and that's to teach English in a school or to teach any class in a school?
To teach any class. The reasoning behind that is to get the work visa and work permit, it's required that you have a bachelor's degree. So even if you are teaching like physical education in a school, they would still require that you have a bachelor's degree because you need to get the visa to legally work there.
So technically, if you have like a bachelor, you can teach science, for example, in a school in Thailand.
Yes, exactly. Those positions for like other subjects like math, science, computers, and things, those are readily available in schools, but there's usually only one position. So those are available, but there's not as many options available because there's just not as many of them. So the English teaching jobs, a school will have, like 30 positions, and then they'll just have 1 or 2 for science.
Does that mean that kids at school, they're learning in English?
It depends on the school, but so some schools that have more focused English programs, so they will have their English classes, and then they might have science and English, but then they will also have science and math in the Thai language as well. So then they'll have Thai teachers for the other subjects.
Okay. And you said that people who usually come to Thailand, they can try for a year, or some people stay longer, even 10 years. How easy to stay in Thailand if you are an English teacher or a teacher in general?
It's very easy to stay in Thailand as a teacher because of the visa, really. If you choose to keep teaching in Thailand, then you can get the teaching visa. After about 5 years, they require that you get a special teaching license in Thailand. It's not very expensive. It's a little time consuming, but some schools require that. But technically, you could be teaching in Thailand for as many years as you want and be secure with a visa. And it's, of course, nice having a salary every month as well.
Okay. And because Thailand is such a cheap country to live, I guess the pay is related to the cost of living.
Yeah.
If you make money in Thai, how you call the...
Baht.
In baht. So if you make your living in baht, do you make enough money to travel and go back to see your family every once in a while? Or people have to be like you, start your own company to be able to afford that kind of lifestyle?
So you make about $1,000 a month teaching at a private school. So that would be if you're not a specialized English teacher. So if you do have an education degree and a teaching certificate, you could make up to $3,000 to $4,000 a month, which is incredible because you'd work at an international school. But for most people who are just looking to teach in Thailand and don't have an education degree, you make about $1,000 a month, which is plenty in Thailand. Living in Bangkok on $1,000 a month, you wouldn't save much money. In Chiang Mai, you're able to save some money, and it depends on your lifestyle, of course. But $1,000 is really comfortable for a single person living on their own because your rent, you shouldn't be paying more than $200 a month. And that would be living on your own in a studio apartment with plenty of space, air conditioning, everything that you could need for $200. For food, you don't have to spend that much money either because Thai food is $1, and that's not an exaggeration. Like a Thai dish is $1. So it depends how you eat because, of course, Western food here is available, especially in Chiang Mai. The Western food's very good. Like I have a pizza place because there's an Italian restaurant owned by an Italian guy, and it's wonderful. There's Mexican restaurants. It's amazing. The foreigners living here from all over makes the food incredible, as well as the local Thai food. But of course, if you get a pizza, it's about $6 versus the Thai food for $1. So it depends how you live, and that's how you can save money. But one thing, when people especially have student loans or they're really looking to travel and save money, I always suggest that people teach English online as a side job. Many people are teaching English online as their full-time jobs now. But if you're teaching in a school, you could maybe teach like 2 hours online a night and even save an additional $1,000 a month or something for your upcoming trips. When I was first teaching, I did that. Taught English online about 15 hours a week. And then I was able to visit New Zealand and Australia on my summer vacation for a month. And I was able to have enough money for that. So definitely, if you're intentionally trying to save money for something, there are ways to do it.
Okay, yeah, no, it makes sense. Thanks for the tips.
Yeah.
How often do you go back to see family in the US?
Well, before COVID, I would see my family like 2 times a year. It's really important to me to see my family and see my friends at home because I love my life here and I love how everything's going. But I never wanted to jeopardize my connections with my family and my friends. So I try to make it easy on everyone as possible. But my family's been amazing. They're always willing to travel and meet me somewhere. So like 2 years ago, we all met in Portugal for Christmas. The year before that, they visited Thailand. And then the year before that, I went to the US for Christmas. I sometimes go to the US in the summer. But yeah, because of COVID and everything being closed and not being able to travel, this is the longest I haven't seen my family or been home. It's a full year now.
Yeah, COVID definitely made our life much harder to go and see our family, that's for sure.
Yes.
And do you have any regrets about leaving the US?
No, none. And especially with COVID-19 happening, it just shows more and more how precious every day and every moment is. And that's really how I've been living my life forever, but especially since I studied abroad, just being able to enjoy the simple moments, live in the moment, because, you aren't guaranteed every day. So that's only made that more apparent. And I'm really grateful to have been in Thailand during this COVID-19 time because they've really managed to keep it under control. We've still had, been able to have a very good 2020, and most countries haven't been able to say that.
Yeah. So the COVID situation there is not too bad?
No, it's not too bad. Yeah, Thailand officially had like the first case from Wuhan because there are direct flights from Wuhan to Thailand, to Chiang Mai. Mm-hmm. And the first outbreak wasn't so bad, but basically, we had locked down for a month and a half. And, there's a lot of considerations. I'm not a scientist, but anyway, in Thailand, people are compliant. They wear masks. In Asia in general, people were wearing masks, just if you have a cold before there was ever a pandemic. So people are very, aware of others in Asia, and it's important. It's less individualistic and much less selfish. So, as a collective team, Thailand has done very well in handling it. And whenever there's outbreaks or anything, people are immediately compliant. So I think that's a big reason in how it's been okay here.
Okay, it makes totally sense. Other countries, even in Asia, they're doing well, probably because of the same circumstances.
Yep, exactly.
Hey, what's the biggest upside for you to be an immigrant and to have lived your country?
I would have to say the freedom of living your life how you choose. It definitely helps because it's not just because I live in Thailand this way, because now I have my own business and I'm not tied to 9 to 5. But it's really just the freedom of, choosing, designing your life, choosing how to live day by day by yourself and not really being worried about how others might think of you or, Yeah, I'm very present every single day and I'm grateful for everything. So that's really what's made my life here so wonderful. And yeah, I have no regrets. I'm so happy I did it as early as I did. Yeah, I moved to Thailand when I was 22. Yeah, I turned 22 my second day in Thailand and absolutely no regrets.
So yeah, you were pretty young.
Yep.
Do you think you wouldn't be able to start your own company even if you were in the US? I'm not saying the same kind of business, but would you think you have the chance to do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would not have done it at the speed that I was able to do it here. I think that's a big thing. Well, that's a huge reason I'm able to do my company and live in Thailand is because I never had the extreme financial pressure that I would have had if I tried to work just for myself in the US. I would have had a lot of pressure to just have the money to pay rent, to feed myself, and most likely wouldn't have been as creative and patient in my approaches to my business. Here, I only have to make a certain amount of money to pay my rent, pay my food, and that's covered with less than one client, basically. Yeah. So life here is great. And yeah, and it's complicated to be able to legally work in Thailand and set up your own business, but it's still less complicated than it would be in the US. Like, for example, last year, Loy Krathong is the lantern festival in Thailand, beautiful lanterns. I had River Cruise event, which was the first big event I did. It was 2 nights, 30 people each. It was this river cruise, 3-course meal, unlimited alcohol. It was a really fun event. But anyway, having an event in the US, you would have had to book something really far out, have to have a certain amount, of people, insurance, all these things. But here, it's much more simpler. There is red tape in setting up your company, but there's a lot more freedoms once you can legally work here. There's a lot more opportunities and things you can do.
And that is because it's the cost of living is so cheap in Thailand that makes it easier to live and more enjoyable to live, or just the culture itself?
Yeah, it's definitely the cost of living. And the cost of living makes it easier for the nitty-gritty of being able to set up a company. But then, of course, what's kept me here, too, is the culture. Thailand is extremely cheap, and I love that about Thailand. But if that was the only reason and the locals weren't kind and a great culture and it wasn't safe, then I'm sure I wouldn't have stayed. There's plenty of cheap places to live in the world, but you have to have some other parts of the package to make it worth it.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And even then, I remember when I went to Thailand, even I was there on holiday, so you can't really compare like an holiday with living in the country. But at the same time, I didn't have to worry about money, how much things are cost. I would just spend the money and I live like a rich person, even for just a couple of weeks.
Yep.
When you're moving abroad, that factor is pretty important that you don't have to be worried about money, because you say you couldn't work for a couple of months. There in another country where you have to pay your rent, you have to pay for your expenses. Not working for 2 months can be quite difficult. While maybe in Thailand, especially if you have some money saved in the US dollar, you can live comfortably for a couple of months without working.
Absolutely. And the reason I came up with my program and services as well is because, yes, everything is so cheap. But when you first move to Thailand, you definitely can throw away money that you shouldn't have. When I first moved here, everything's a dollar. And then suddenly those dollars do add up. I remember withdrawing from the ATM for the 3rd time over, a course of 2 months. And I was like, wow, yes, that was cheap, but that was still money. Because one big thing is, you can get a Thai dish for $1 and you should be, but then you can also get a Thai dish for $4 at a certain place and it might not be worth it. So that's the kind of thing that I like helping people with when they first move here, to kind of explain how much you should be paying for things. Because there are imported grocery stores, which are wonderful when you're living here for so long. I'm able to buy pasta sauce and sour cream and other random imported products, and which is nice. And I'm able to cook things I miss at home. But it actually is more expensive to cook in Thailand than it is to eat out, which is not the case in most places.
No, exactly.
Yeah, everything's backward here in the best ways possible. So, and I love explaining that to people. So actually, don't cook. And someone's like, really? Yes, don't cook. Go out and go get yourself lunch. Okay. Yeah. So, and especially like as rent goes here, you can pay $1,000 a month in rent if you wanted to. There's a place for that here. It would be like a mansion. But still, it's like realizing the value in what you're paying for. Because an apartment could still cost $600 a month and maybe it has a shared swimming pool. But then the same apartment without that pool is $200 a month. So you have to really think it's like, well, maybe I should just start out with this cheaper apartment and then visit a resort or a hotel pool and then just pay entrance for that. So it's good to consider what you need in the beginning. And I like helping people do that because those beginning couple months that you can really blow the money that you might have saved as your safety net. So it's like maybe you have that money, you worked really hard for it. So maybe save that for traveling and figure out your monthly expenses right away.
And do you think like if you want to save some money at the beginning, do you have to like downsize your life or you can just live a normal life? Like do you have to live in a bad place to save money or just a normal place that you would find in another country, you would find in Thailand for quite cheap?
No, exactly. Like the best part is you can live really comfortably and then still save money. So like $200 is a studio apartment by yourself, like no roommates. So that might be wherever you're from, Europe, US, like you might have never been able to live on your own and pay rent. So you can live on your own for $200, which I don't know many places that you can pay rent and to not have roommates for that amount of money, especially.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Especially in North America.
Yeah, exactly.
Make me want to move to Thailand right
yes.
now.
I can help you do that. Yeah.
You make it sound like Thailand is super easy, but did you have to face any challenges when you moved to Thailand?
The way I went into moving to Thailand was that I had no expectations, which I believe is a huge part of why I've been able to live here for so long, is that really I went in with no expectations. So when I moved to Thailand, I had not ever been to Asia. So I'm saying I'm moving to Chiang Mai. So then when I arrived in Chiang Mai, I was kind of like, okay, great. This is it. I wasn't trying to change anything. I wasn't like wishing there was more of something. So basically like everything that happened, I was pleasantly surprised about. I just didn't have the expectations. So that's a really easy way to set yourself up to going to live somewhere. So the challenges in the beginning were certainly like figuring out how I will save money. Like the first like 6 months definitely didn't have much money because also I just graduated from university. I didn't have loads of money to begin with. So I definitely spent that safety net in the beginning. So for the first few months, I was like solely living on the teaching salary, which was still completely fine. So it definitely took me some time to figure out how to save money. And really like challenges wise, I kind of just like took them. Like I started my company and because I knew I wasn't going to teach English forever, and I set up my company while I was teaching English. So because I knew it would take some time to do the legal work to set up the company. And then I knew getting the visa through the company would be tough. I mean, getting the business visa through your company is a process, but you just have to be patient with it. Like at first I got a 3-month visa instead of the year one I wanted. And I had to specifically go to Penang, Malaysia to get it. So I had to do 2 trips to Penang to only get 3-month visas and pay money for the paperwork and things. But eventually, once I got my 1-year visa and kind of figured out the legalities and all how Thailand works, it got easier. But really, any slight challenges I had, I just took it as an experience to now make everyone else's experience much easier to live in Thailand, set up a company, because now I can help people set up their own companies in Thailand. And I think it's really important to have a foreigner kind of holding your hand through it because you do sign a lot of documents in Thai and you kind of go into things quite blindly. And any lawyer you hire, most likely they can't do the hand holding that you need as a foreigner to understand how to do business in Thailand. So that's how I started my company, to just really help people make it all easier, because it was definitely challenging and hard for me at times, but I've learned what it takes, and now I'm helping people from day one know how to do everything correctly and easiest for them so they can just follow their dreams and live in Thailand.
Yep, if it was too easy, you wouldn't have a business.
Exactly, exactly.
And do you feel lucky to be an immigrant?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm very privileged just having a US passport in general that allowed me to just show up in Thailand and then get a visa because, yeah, where you're from, you know the weight of your passport. And being an American, even though how America is, it still have to be so grateful for that passport. It allows you to go anywhere in the world and stay places like in Chiang Mai, there's actually a US consulate. So then when my passport filled all my pages, filled up from all my travels, I was able to just renew my passport in Chiang Mai. My new passport was sent in 3 weeks. I remember getting my passport at the post office in New York City, and what a process of months that was. And then just in Chiang Mai, I have everything that I could need. So yeah, I'm grateful and I'm very, very lucky that I am able to live my life and I'm healthy enough to do this. Yeah.
But for the listener that don't know particularly well Thailand, what's the difference between Chiang Mai and Bangkok, or why did you pick Chiang Mai instead of other cities in Thailand?
So Chiang Mai and Bangkok are the two biggest cities in Thailand. Bangkok is the largest, and Chiang Mai is basically a medium-sized city surrounded by mountains. So it's really wonderful. Like, I haven't been able to come up with a city to compare it to. Basically, in Chiang Mai, you can get anywhere in 20 minutes. So the main transportation in Thailand is motorbikes, and it's really quick and cheap and easy to get around. In a motorbike or in a car, in like 20 minutes, you can get to anywhere in the city, which is so amazing. Like, from being from New York City and living in Paris and loving Paris, I thought I only really liked major cities, but I realized the real value in like smaller, medium-sized cities. It's really comfortable to live here and to see your friends and figure out where to live. Because in New York, someone I would consider as a best friend, they would still live almost an hour and a half away on the subway, and we'd be so busy with our jobs, we'd see each other like once every 4 months, which is crazy. But here, in 15 minutes, I can pretty much be at any of my friends' doors, and we're all relaxed. We made our money in the few hours that we work. And yeah, it's just calmer life here. But Bangkok is wonderful too. I really enjoy visiting it. I would never want to live there. I could live there if I had to. But skyscrapers and, city life isn't the reason why I moved to Thailand. But Bangkok has a lot to offer for people. And if you teach in Bangkok, you get higher salary, but the cost of living is higher. But yeah, Chiang Mai is cheaper than Bangkok. And Chiang Mai also has its own international airport, which is really great. So you can fly from Chiang Mai direct to a lot of Southeast Asian countries too.
Oh, really? Because I remember when I flew to Chiang Mai, I have to go through Bangkok for some reasons.
Yeah, it depends. They're opening up some flights. I mean, post-COVID as well. But now they have some flights like Chiang Mai to Hanoi. I think even Chiang Mai to Siem Reap as well. There's a few options. But yeah, otherwise you go through Bangkok too. But at least in Chiang Mai, you can also get direct flights to the beaches, to the south of Thailand. So in 1 hour, you can get from Chiang Mai to Krabi and then be on the beach. So
because Chiang Mai is not the classical picture that you will think about Thailand. It's not on the ocean. There's no beach, but there's a lot of outdoor. I remember when I went there, there's like so many activity you can do. There's mountains, there's jungle not far away. There's so much you can do in outdoor, which is, for me, for my personal preference, I would prefer living in Chiang Mai because of that. Just because for what you describe, it's a city, but it's not too big. And there's this outdoor that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you're into hiking, bike riding, anything, everything's around. Yeah, there's mountains everywhere, which is really wonderful. And yeah, it might not be the exact image of Thailand if you think Thailand is just a beach, but actually this is the best part about Thailand. Of course, I'm biased, but if you like mountains, Chiang Mai is a wonderful place to be. And it's nice that, of course, Chiang Mai is touristy. I mean, the whole world's tourism. We'll see how that changes post-COVID and how everything. But, Chiang Mai's not just set up for tourists. It's a small city and there's no just tourist attractions, just for tourists. It's nice that the mountains are there. You appreciate what's already around. You're not trying to make things artificial because sometimes at the beach, it's wonderful you have the beach, but then, it's set up specifically for tourists and, locals are only living there just to make money from tourists. So it's nice at Chiang Mai. It's like locals know this is their home. It's still their choice in living here. And it's beautiful nature.
And for the listener that are interested to move to Thailand, to move to Chiang Mai, do you have any advice? For example, do you think this could be easier for somebody that doesn't want to teach English, or you reckon that teaching English is the first step you should do when you move to Thailand?
Teaching English does not have to be the first step because many people just either have no interest in teaching English or, don't have the qualifications, don't have the degree. So Chiang Mai is also very popular because of the digital nomad community. So many digital nomads are living here and working at all the wonderful co-working spaces. There's so many meetups. Really, Chiang Mai is so wonderful because so many foreigners are living in Chiang Mai and, living their dream life. So one of my favorite things about the community as well, when I was first setting up my company, I really needed to talk to some people who have set up companies before. So there were plenty of people around willing to just have a cup of coffee, chat, take a look at my website, give me some feedback just from their experience. And the range of foreigners living here are from all over. I'm one of the youngest. A lot of people that I consider friends here are in their 50s. One of my great friends, Jennifer, here, she's in her late 70s. Here, people are just living here to be happy and give back to others and share their knowledge. And age is really just a number. So really, no matter how old you are or where you are in life, moving to Chiang Mai, there are opportunities for you.
Awesome. And if people want to find more about you and maybe they related with your story, have any question, how people can find you?
Yeah, so my website is settleinabroad.com. Instagram is settleinabroad. My name, Amanda Gedney. My Instagram is Amanda L. Gedney. And we can share everything else on the show notes, I'm sure. But my email is info@settleinabroad.com. Basically, search Settle in Abroad and you'll find me.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, definitely. Everything is going to be in the show notes and on the website, immigrantslife.com, for people that can find you more easily. Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Amanda, for taking the time to share your story and give us some advice and some tips to move to Thailand and moving abroad.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. You can find the show notes with everything we discussed in this episode on immigrantslife.com/episode 33. If you want to support the show, you can share this episode with your friends. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcast and Podchaser. That will help this show growing and reach more people. If you don't know how to leave the review, I made a tutorial for you. Just visit immigrantslife.com/review and follow the simple steps. And also, do you want to be my guest on the show and share your story? Visit immigrantslife.com/yourstory, fill up the form, and I will get in touch with you. Thanks again for listening. Talk to you in the next one. Ciao.